All right, we are rolling. Thank you for being here today. It means a lot to share the time with you. This is a historical moment for this podcast, as you're my first guest on the show, Jami Schlueter.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Before we begin our conversation, I'd like to start with a brief gratitude exercise.
Sure.
First thing I want to do is say grace. I'm grateful. Grateful for the opportunity to speak. Grateful for the freedom to make my own decisions. And grateful to be alive. For whatever that means, I truly don't know. But I'm thankful for it every single day.
No, I like it. It's very grounding, very humbling. It allows you to kind of position yourself before you get rolling with anything. So I appreciate you for creating that space. Appreciate you for inviting me into this space as well and just being a part of the journey. And, such a pleasure it is to be a part of the start of the journey because, I'd love to see where it goes. And we reflect in 10 years and look at this conversation that we had when we were 21, 22 years old. And all we can do is be grateful. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. So
for sure. And you know what, man? I love how this episode came together because we were both in the gym and we were working out. You came in and you were working in with me on the bench press. I'm pretty sure you were doing a superset.
Very humbling process, I must say, because you had to take a few plates off to let me get work in.
So I left to refill my water bottle. And during my walk, the idea popped in my head. When I came up to you after I proposed doing a podcast together, and you totally rolled with it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a great reminder that sometimes opportunities for action can present themselves right in the middle of your normal routine. When you're just doing like an everyday mundane thing, you never know. It just takes talking to somebody for a certain circumstance to blossom in a way.
For sure. No, I'm glad you asked me. I've been on the other side of the podcast where I'm doing the interviewing, and so being able to be interviewed, reflect on my journey to where I've gotten, and it's an ongoing journey. I'm not finished, and so, like I said, I'm very grateful to get rolling with it, and even more grateful that it's someone like you. I've seen how driven and how focused you are, how grounded you are in all of your orientations, and so, when somebody like that asks you to interview them, or sorry, the other way around, asks you to be an interviewee on their show, it's a real pleasure. So
I appreciate that. Well, first of all, congratulations on reaching your first NCAA championship, which was in the Decathlon in 2024. Tell us a little more about the championship and what sort of preparation that took, as well as how do you approach that mentally?
Oh, for sure. That whole preparation started in August of 2023. I came back early. I did something called jumps camp with my coach. The jumps events and the decathlon were my weaker events, and those are some events that can really score you a lot of points. So came back early for my summer, cut it short so I can get into jumps camp. I've really got it rolling. Track and field in the NCAA is an indoor and outdoor season. So you have an indoor NCAAs, which is hosted in March, early April, and then you have the outdoor NCAAs, which is hosted in June. The goal was to make indoors, but sadly I didn't make it. That's the reality of it. It's an incredibly competitive field, and so therefore falling short can be a very bittersweet process, but really left a chip on my shoulder, and it lit a fire, and it then just became a journey on how I can kind of make that flame useful to me and channel it. I had a lot of support around me, from coaches to my mother, who's also my mental coach, and also I work with a performance coach. All of those people really homed in my skills, my hunger, my drive to want to get it right the second time to make it for outdoor NCAAs. And the goal wasn't just to show up, but it was also to show up and show out. And that means I wanted to better the position I came in at. I came in at, I think, ranked 13th or 14th, and then to finish it top 10 in the NCAA. It was just such a privilege. I competed against some amazing guys. The person who won the actual event went on to win the silver at the Olympics that same year in Paris. And so when you're rubbing shoulders with guys like that, you're humbled by these giants, but you see where you want to go, and you see these journeys that these guys have been on. You're like, right, I'm chipping away in the right things and just got to keep doing it back, and hopefully we'll run it back in 2025.
Tell me a little more about the events in the decathlon.
So simply, it's a 2-day event. Day 1, 100 meters, long jump, shot put, high jump, 400. That's day 1. Right. Day 2, 110 hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and the 1500. It's an event that really tests you on just sheer athleticism, because you've got to be fast, you've got to have endurance, you've got to be springy, and you've just got to have grit. Decathletes, we don't train every event. We don't train every event every day. So we can only do it once a day. and that means also once a week. So if I miss hurdles on Monday, I have to wait all the way to the next cycle to jump back in. And this in comparison to a full-time hurdler, they train maybe 2-3 times a week in just that event. And so we really have to get very good at chasing perfection, but being okay that we're not going to always get it, and that it's going to be a long and tedious process. So, no, I've enjoyed the event so far. It's a really great community. All the guys, because we're competing 2 days with each other, we get along very well. I think sometimes that can be to the detriment because you also want to beat these guys. And so, it's not easy trying to beat your friends, but you got to find that within yourself if you want to be at the top. And so it's a dog-eat-dog world.
What event is probably the most difficult for you? I would assume that once you get to day 2, you're pretty tired already. So I don't know if it's on day 1 there might be something.
Yeah, there's I mean I love day 1. It's all power and speed based, and you just go at it, you go gung ho. But then pole vault on day 2 definitely catches me out. I mean, it's an event I am constantly challenged in, and I've had my highs and I've definitely had some lows, and I'm not the only one who feels those lows. The people around me feel it, and so yeah, I'd say the pole vault catches me out just because it's event number 8. Your body's tired, you're physically tired, you're mentally tired. You've been competing now for about 12, 13 hours, sometimes depending on what kind of event you're in. And so you're now expected to run as fast as you can, jump as hard as you can, and then use all the upper body strength you have left to hurl yourself over a bar. And then you've got to do that several more times because you don't only do it once. You want to try to get a PB every time you compete. And so, yeah, I think that's the one that can sometimes get the better of me, but I try to master it before it does that.
How much time do you have in between events, you say?
So the bare minimum that you get is about half an hour. Some decathlons I've done in the States, they run very quickly. They'll literally, from the final jumper, they'll start the half an hour clock and then you're into the next event. So long jump finishes at 1:30, you're in the shot put at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
But then I've been in some events, some international meets where they'll split the sessions up. So you'll do 3 events in the morning, then you'll go home for 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, and then come back in the evening.
Wow.
And that one catches you out because you think, all right, let me take a power nap, let me sleep. But
Yeah.
if you sleep for too long, warming up for the next event, which is the high jump, it gets very hard. And yeah, I've definitely been caught out on that process before. So it's just managing your energy levels, managing your emotional systems, because it gets the better, it can catch up to you. And so, yeah, it just depends where you are, what kind of event, how big the field is. But traditionally at the higher comps, the Olympics, the World Champs, international meets, they'll tend to split it up with a session in the morning, session in the evening with a 2 to 3 hour break in between events.
During those 30 minutes, what are you thinking about? I'm assuming how do you transition from just facing one event and then getting mentally prepared for the next, as well as fueling your body and just strategically taking that time?
Fortunately, through experience, I've learned how to fuel. I love to have porridge in the morning, so porridge, 3 scoops of Nutella, there's no science behind it, that's just what I like, and a bit of some blueberries. And I know that will get me all the way through till past the 100 meters. And I also I warm up 2 hours before the start of the race. So if the race is at 1:30, I'm warming up around 11:30 or maybe even 11:15. And so I know that will take me through my warm up. And then I'm immediately, the minute I finish the 100, I'm refueling. I have it's kind of like baby food is, what's it called? Applesauce. I have kind of like an applesauce in between events because it gives me a shot of carbohydrates, a shot of sugar, and keep me rolling for the next event. And then just depending on what the event demands of is how I'll fuel. If it's a shot put, I know I can eat some pasta because I don't need to be light and springy. I can be a little bit more heavier for that one, but I definitely want to be light and springy for the high jump. And I think also just one thing that I definitely also use a lot, and it's kind of like an old golfer's trick, is when in golfer doesn't play his shot very well, he takes his glove off, maybe redoes his shoelace just to kind of reset his mind. It's kind of that moment of smell the coffee, and it takes your mind away from what you're doing, takes it to smelling coffee, and brings you back again. And so putting on a different pair of shoes, putting on a different pair of shorts for the next event helps me reset. And even if the event went bad previously, it allows me to take a fresh mindset, a fresh pair of shorts, fresh pair of energy into the next event. And so that's kind of that half an hour process, sometimes even 20-minute process I go through in between events.
So you're just talking about that extra shot of sugar in between an event. Are you a caffeine guy?
No, I think the only time I'll have caffeine is I'll drink a Red Bull in a decathlon, but I can't even get through it. I'll like the literal 300 or 400 milliliter cans, I'll only get about halfway because it's just, I hate the taste of it. And I don't drink coffee. I prefer hot chocolate or a chai latte.
I like that. I'm not much of a coffee guy myself.
No, so not a caffeine person, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Going back, you were mentioning highs and lows. It's always interesting to see how people grow from challenges. And my first question is, have you ever experienced something that really tested you emotionally, like a heartbreak or a major loss?
I think when you ask that question, two situations stand out to me. The first one is when I had an injury that put me out for 393 days. I tore my lateral meniscus, and I did it during COVID. So rehabilitation wasn't the smoothest one because a lot of medical centers and stuff were closed or were only catering for certain people in the public. During that process, it was track that injured me. I was doing some plyometric exercises, my knee went crunch, and that was me done for the next year and a bit. And so that's when I definitely learned a lot more about myself, because track used to be an outlet for me, but now the outlet that I would go to was the outlet that was hurting me the most. And so I think that hardship and figuring out how to come back from that, how to find happiness and joy outlets in other places became very important. And then the other time I think of was probably not making nationals the first time. I know they're very sports related ones, but they're the ones that just happened most recently and that keep chips on my shoulder for me.
Sure.
I think those are the ones that fuel me the most when it comes to my athletic performances and what I try to do as well in the classroom, because if I do well in class, I can do well on the track, because as long as you do the little things right, the major things will fall into place. And so, yeah, when I didn't make the nationals, because I trained so hard building up to it, I cut my summer early, came back for jumps camp, really locked in, and then to fall short, top 16 go, I think I was 17th or 18th, and that really definitely hit hard. And I don't have my parents around me to immediately console me. My parents are divorced. Fortunately, my mom is in the UK, so I can call her, but she had to be up at 3 a.m. kind of trying to console me.
That's
So
tough.
it's not an easy process, but I've been fortunate enough to have any real hardships that have set me back massively. But the athletic ones definitely weigh hard, and I always think about them, because you miss that nationals, you can't rewind it. You can only move forward from it, and so it's how you take those lessons to build you into the next one is the most important feature.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
How did you find, or what outlets did you choose when you can exercise as much?
I allowed myself to cry, because I usually I try to keep on a brave face, just because that's what we're told to do sometimes. But I allowed myself to cry. I allowed myself to cry in front of people I feel most comfortable with, because
Is that the teammates?
Teammates. I was at boarding school at the time, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
Teammates, my house parent, and my mother.
How old were you?
I was 17, 18. Yeah. 17 going on 18, and then 18 was the majority of the injury. But injured when I was 17 on the October 15th. My birthday was about a couple of weeks, a week after that. And so yeah, I allowed myself to cry. I gave myself that space, that room. But once I cried, the tears, the physical tears leaving your eyes, was also my reset moment, and then the growth. And then it just took me working with specific people. My mother is very well versed in neuro-linguistic programming, so being able to anchor your body and your mind to the goals you want to achieve. And then I use that and channel that again with working with performance coaches when it comes to mental fitness. And so I really lean in on those kind of individuals, because when you don't have the sport you do or the physical exercise, it's your mind that you have to work out the most as well to keep it busy. And so I figured out ways to do that. When I was injured, I would schedule training. Well, when I had scheduled training, I would schedule study times with my tutors one-on-one, so that I could academically at least improve, so that I can keep my mind working at that same level. And then the same thing, I would find other outlets, other ways to keep my mind busy. And so yeah, we'll just kind of proceed from there.
Could you go into more depth about the neuro-linguistic programming?
Neuro-linguistic programming is the idea that self-talk and manifestation can help you create the goals you want to achieve. It really comes into fruition for me when you miss a bar in the high jump. High jump, you have to clear the bar in order to go up to the next height. 170, if you hit it off, you have 2 more attempts after that first attempt to try and clear it. And so it's when you're walking off the mat and you're speaking to your coach and then coming back to the start of the run-up to redo the jump, that's when I really kind of tie into it. It's the things I'm telling myself, though, you can do this, you're healthy, this is in you, this is within your grasp, you can achieve this, I'm there. Mm-hmm. And then not only that, but visualizing and talking to myself about what I'm going to do after I clear that bar is the most important bit I've learned, especially last season. Of it's not just the clearing, but what are you going to feel after you do that? Where do you feel it is in your chest? And so I'll speak to myself in those kind of situations of, oh, you've cleared the bar now, Jay, where do you feel that excitement? Is it excitement that you're feeling? And so it's kind of that stuff. And then also another big tool in neuro-linguistic programming is anchoring. And that's kind of pulling yourself down to the ground when things aren't going right. It's, like I said, that smell of coffee moment takes your brain away from a situation that might have angered you or got you all vexed, and then pulls you away, so then you're able to reset, and then you come back and you don't even know what you're upset about.
the two things that really stick out to me is, first of all, you identify the motion, and second of all, you also identify the part where you're feeling it on your body,
Oh, massively.
within or wherever that may be. I never really thought about that, but when you just explained to me neuro-linguistic programming, I thought of kind of like fighters, boxers, before they get into the ring, that self-talk. I don't have any examples, but I do know it's just that self-confidence and telling yourself that you are the best, or maybe not to that extent, but that self-talk, the self-confidence really ups your game.
Yeah.
And that also goes into Tony Robbins. He's a motivational speaker.
He does NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Exactly it. So Tony Robbins, I listen to him, and it's all about rewiring the brain, and I test that with myself all the time.
Yeah.
If it's I don't get a good grade from a test, or I just didn't perform to the expectations, I just have to go back and be like, hey, I can do this. You only have two choices, right? You either back down, or you tell yourself you can, and then you try again. And in order to make that attempt again, you got to be fully prepared and build yourself back up. Wow. It's really important.
Bouncing off your point, I mean, Tony Robbins, and I've even heard Conor McGregor speak about it, and it's just controlling what is going on in your body. And that's the bit that interests me the most. The way I can think about it for, I guess, most of the audience is, if you've ever done a bike session, you've done some sort of assault bike or like a pedaling session where your legs feel heavy like lead. That's kind of called lactic acid. Mm-hmm. And so one of the exercises that I play with when I'm in training, when I'm working out that lactic acid threshold, is I attribute a color to the lactic. I make lactic become red, and I make when I don't have lactic become white. And so when I'm in my hardest part of the session, I'm panting, I'm sweating, and the lactic acid's all over my legs and my body, I attribute that red color, and I start breathing. And I bring myself down, and I feel my heart rate drop. And as my heart rate gets lower, the red turns into a pink, into a lighter pink, and into a white. And that's me telling myself the lactic acid is leaving my body and I'm fresh. And Conor McGregor talks about it with pain. If you get punched in the shoulder, find that pain, magnify it, now make it smaller. Magnify it again, make it smaller. Now grab it into your fist, move it to the other arm, and play around with it. It's just that idea that you can control the emotions and what your body systems are feeling. Like, if you can visualize very vividly, you can almost get the same arousal with your heart rate beating and you're sometimes panting a little bit. You get that same level of arousal as you do when you're actually working out. And so that's when that NLP process really ties in very, very clearly into the work that you're trying to achieve off the actual physical exercises you're doing. And so that's become a massive tool in my toolkit, I'd say.
How did the rehabilitation work when you were trying to come back from that injury?
It was mainly just around, first just having to sit in a brace for 3 months and just learn how to straighten my leg out again. Then it was doing banded exercises into doing bodyweight squats. I was fortunate to have family friends who had a aqua treadmill and a pool which blows water at you. So it's only about 10 meters wide, but because the water's blowing at you, you swim against it. And so I was able to train in that kind of way. And then from that, just slowly progressed with loading my body into very gentle jogging and then just building up from scratch again. Because after surgery, your knee is worse than when you were injured it, because they break everything down and they have to fix it and repair it, and they really beat a lot out of it when they're in that surgical suite. And so I had to really learn how to rebuild my knee and not to push it. And the differentiation in my legs was shocking. I mean, one literally looked like I was a distance runner from Kenya, and then the other one looked like I was a sprinter from Jamaica. And so, yeah.
So you said it was 390 days?
393 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were 19, 20?
Yeah, I'd say 19, because the way I measured it was when I was ready to get back into competition. And so this 393rd day when I finished the competition, and I was like, yeah, he's healthy. Because I was running and I could compete, I was at competition level and could train, but I didn't know how it would hold up under the pressure of competition. So that's when I judged when I was back.
So tying the personal struggles you faced and growth, how... and going into other people in society, what do you think is the biggest struggle for people our age today? For me, it seems like many are struggling with taking that first step or thinking big in general. Mm-hmm. What do you think is holding people back from dreaming big and pushing for more in life?
I think it's very clear that there's a lot of societal pressures on us, and those pressures cause us to put even more pressures on ourselves. Populations are growing, so there's more a much greater competition pool, and so the need to stand out becomes even more difficult. And in order to stand out, we have to work harder. But the only way we work harder is through the pressure. And you just think academically, you're someone who's at Foster's at the University of Washington. Getting to the University of Washington is already a big feat. Getting into Foster's is an even bigger feat. Graduating from Foster's is another big feat. The next 4 years of your life, I mean, you're not a freshman, but when you do that journey, the 4 years of your life at the University of Washington isn't easy. And that pressure can really burn a lot of us out. And so it's how we take care of ourselves. I think, based off of your question, I think there is, like you said, there are pressures going on. I wouldn't immediately put a name on it because it's all unique to each different person. I think all I can provide is perhaps an observation of the kind of pressures that exist just because of the growth in competition pools that are out there, how competitive different situations are nowadays, and so, yeah.
The societal pressures, first that comes to my mind is the social media, the constant stimulation that people are getting with the advancement of technology. It really can hinder someone's personal growth and their goal to improve as a person, because if you're always constantly being hit back with information left and right, how are you going to stop and settle down and relax and also just think to yourself more? Give yourself that time to kind of think about your own goals, think about your identity, think about just all the different, how are you going to spend your time in your life and the future and just in general.
It's true. It definitely ties into that notion of delayed gratification because, like I said, societal pressure, social media has these instant stimuli, and so are we ready to put in the work the process before we receive our outcome goal?
It's now just it's added to the list of addictions that people can suffer from now. The amount of anxiety that I see with my peers too, just because the complexities of social media, and when you're comparing yourselves to others, it makes it harder to develop that self-confidence when you just see people who are blasting through life or just really doing well. And you kind of look at yourself, you're like, well, I'm really far away from that.
I think the harsh reality is, as well as we measure success through financial gains, and the way to make financial gains now, there's so many different ways you could do it, and the speed at which you can make those massive leaps to different tax brackets can be done very quickly nowadays. And us as students, we're watching those people who didn't go to university now and achieving those tax bracket jumps very, very quickly, and you think, am I doing the right thing? You start second guessing yourself, and then you fall into the wrong bubble because you're less confident in the things that you're doing. You're starting to not trust the process or the path you've been on. And so I can see why, it can become a problem, it can become a stress. And even the minute you start second guessing yourself, it can lead to that anxious thoughts, the anxious feelings. Are you who you say you are at the start of the journey? Is that the plan you set out? Is this the plan that you should be on? Because someone else is doing something that's achieving way more. So, there's definitely a lot of pressures, like I said, societal ones for sure, and it just manifests in different ways. And so it's just important to acknowledge them and create our own bespoke responses to them.
Well said. Going into background and inspirations, I know your hometown is London.
Yeah.
But you were born in Germany. Funny enough, German ethnicity.
Oh, there we go.
Are you bilingual?
Yeah. I grew up speaking German. I was born in Reutlingen, which is about half an hour away from Stuttgart. So I lived there for about 4 or 5 years before I moved to the Middle East, and then went to boarding school in that period of time. Bit by bit, we slowly started packing up business in the Middle East with my parents, and then my dad went to Germany, my mom moved back to London, and been there for a little bit, and now I'm in Seattle. So fortunate to have lived in very many different places and picked up languages along the way, but I'd say bilingual in German, just my dad's German, and that's how I keep up my communication with him. I'm fortunate to have half brothers, so I want to make sure I can stay connected with them, and the best way to do that is in their native tongue. And so, German, English. I try to learn as many languages as I can as well. I think it's fun. You learn to understand people you meet them on their level when you can speak a language with them, even if it's broken English or broken French in the
it's the
situation.
effort that counts, right?
Yeah, it's the effort that counts, and the smile that it brings on them is definitely helpful. It gives you encouragement to keep doing what you're doing. So
communication, such a powerful tool.
Very key. Yeah.
So tell me more about your life and the countries you've been in. Where in the Middle East did you go?
So I grew up in the I spent about 11 to 12 years in the UAE, in Dubai in particular. We moved there when I was, like I said, 4 or 5. I went to an English school out there, and then when I turned 10, I went to a boarding school. And so I was at boarding school for about 8, 9 years of my life,
Wow.
That was definitely, I love the time. I want to send my kids to boarding school. I mean, a lot of, I think American viewers might disagree, because I think the stigma around boarding schools in America is very different to the boarding schools in the UK and in Europe. But I think it taught me some awesome lessons. And I was fortunate as well, because I was at a boarding school that wasn't boys only, it was mixed. And so you're able to kind of, mix with different kinds of groups, learn a lot about yourself in that process as well. And I think being in a mixed boarding school is definitely, I think it's a lot more fun, because, just having a lot of male energy can sometimes be very draining, because the days you want off is when, might be the day that your boy wants to be on, and, get you all pumped, and you're like, I'm not there, mate, I'm not there.
How do you think your upbringing shaped your life and your personality now, maybe your habits too?
I've always said a village is required to raise a child, and I think I'm a child of multiple villages. The village of Germany, the village that I grew up in there, to the boarding school, to the Nigerian and British congregation that surrounded me, and the German one. There's a lot of lessons that I learned, the ones that have always stood out to me and I think will always carry me on, and the ones that I pass on to my kids will mostly be those like Nigerian ones. There's always that push to achieve more, to never be satisfied, to be an overachiever, and to sell out in that process to do it, just figuring out ways. The best example everyone always gives is, you come home with 1A in your maths class, and your mum replies to you, only 1A, where are the rest? And then you get all A's, no valedictorian. And so there's always barriers to push and glass ceilings to break. And so I think those Nigerian values definitely always keep me grounded. And there's always this phrase that my mum used to say, that no matter what I achieved in my life, whether it be graduating valedictorian or going to nationals, medaling at nationals, winning at nationals, my mum would always remind me that the phrase would be, who born you? Which is a phrase that says, you might have done all these things, but remember who you came out of, because I will humble you the same way I made you. And so it lets you know that there's a little bit of seniority, and for sure, I respect it, but I think it also is now a reminder to keep me grounded. And I think that's the most important thing when you're on these paths, when you're on these trajectories. The higher you go, you got to make sure that the floor follows with you. And so that phrase, I remind myself of it every now and then, and my mum does a very good job of reminding me as well.
So the boarding school was at Millfield?
Millfield, yes.
So what was your high school experience like?
Millfield, I loved it. Millfield is an international boarding school in the UK. It has excellent education. It has so many people from so many diverse backgrounds. I especially loved my final boarding house, Jones Kitchen, which was in the corner of an avenue called Chinder Ave. And just the boys that were there was awesome. I think we all got along very well. We were like, anytime you're at boarding school, you're like brothers. But what stood out to me about our house was, each boarding house had their thing. One was the soccer, the football house. The other one was the rugby one, the swimmer house. We were just a house of talented individuals who were good at things, but we'd never work together as a team, but we'd somehow make it work to do well. I don't know, It makes no sense, but we'd have certain inter-house competitions, and certain houses would win the rugby, certain houses would win the football, but we would always be, high bottom feeders. We could come second and third, and then grovel our way to get other achievements, and then get the overall best house award. And so, I love these guys because we knew how to be gritty and how to make do out of a rough situation. And so these are guys who've now gone on to achieve amazing things since graduating, and we're all in a WhatsApp group and check in every now and then. And so I love the boarding house. Some guys that definitely stood out to me, a guy named Tom Bradley, Charlie Lung, Ilyas Amar, and Arnav Misra. Those were like my boys as I grew up, and we were all talented in our own rights, and we never overlapped, which was even more interesting, because Charlie was academic, Tom was a musician, Ilyas was a photographer, and Arnav was
you guys learned a lot from each other.
Because we saw, what inspired me the most is seeing high achievement, but in different realms, because I know the kind of craft that these individuals were put into just to do well in their certain fields, and they know the kind of craft I would go into. And so seeing how that intersectionality exists kind of inspires me to push myself in other areas that I don't usually do. And so I love those guys, and I rock with them every time I can catch up with them.
And were you in England?
In England, I moved in 2016. That's when I moved back to the UK, officially. I've always been in and out because families live there, but officially moved and lived in just outside of West London, just outside of an area called Uxbridge in a little town called New Denham. And so, yeah, I kind of grew up there. And yeah, lived in New Denham all the way up until I graduated Millfield. And then now we moved a little bit further out of London since COVID. And my mum doesn't need to be near Central anymore because, yeah, I'm in Seattle.
What was the culture like in the UK?
The culture, just like Millfield, very diverse. The UK is built upon the Commonwealth. It's, put out these unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, it's colonized a lot of places. I think, the UK has its own answers for that and the reasons for it and has to give a lot of answers. But, it's meant that when you're in the mother of the Commonwealth countries, London, the UK, there's a very diverse group of people and each person brings their own kind of energy. And so it's just a melting pot for excitement in all these kind of different realms. And so I love going home. The weather's exactly the same like Seattle, so I can't settle on weather.
Okay.
But it just seems like a city that's always happening. People go out, I mean, you'll catch people on pubs paying too much for a pint, but they want to stand there and hang out because that's what everyone's doing. That's the thing. And just the life there is fast-paced, but it can get laid back when it needs to. And I've always loved my time there. It is home for me, but I'm not rushing back to go live there quite yet. I think there's some more stuff I'd like to achieve out here before I leave, so.
What has it been like at the University of Washington?
UW? Yeah, I joined here in 2022. I was recruited during COVID, so I wasn't able to do any official visits. So I had to really just go on the feeling I had with the certain coaches. And Coach Toby Stevenson at the University of Washington really stood out to me as a guy who knew what he was doing. A lot of coaches know what they're doing, but he knew what he was doing to get me to where I wanted to be. And then moving to the University of Washington, living in Seattle, I've enjoyed it. I think the only thing I miss is that there's just not as much happening here. But for what I need to be here for, to lock in academically and athletically, it's the right place for me, I'd say. Even when I graduate, I hope to stay out here and train with my coach. He really knows what's going on, and he's created a situation and a group of people that are going to help me achieve that. And so I owe a lot to the University of Washington from an academic, athletic, from a social standpoint, because it's really honed a lot of the skills I've had and really consolidated to make me a better achieving student of the sport of life and academically. And so I definitely owe a lot. I've picked up a lot of mentors along the way who still guide me. They'll always guide me even when I'm out of this place. So
yeah.
The University of Washington has provided me with a lot of stuff that I'm very, very grateful for.
What valuable lessons or things have you learned from your experience at the University of Washington? How have you changed since you were a freshman to a senior now?
Delayed gratification. That you're not going to come in as the starting quarterback or the best decathlete on the team. That there is a pecking order, but you've got to be patient. You might be able to accelerate the pecking order by how hard you work, but you have to be patient in the process. That the plan that these coaches, these people have for you is a 4-year plan. It's not a 1 year or 1 day plan. And so just the delayed gratification process, and almost to scare yourself a little bit when you're learning and you're undergoing those processes, because it's okay to be scared. You learn a lot from failure, you learn a lot from fear, and then you can grow out of it. And so I tried to scare myself as much as I could in situations when it came to sport. I died along the way because sometimes I throw myself too hard into a 1,500 meters and pay the price when I'm on the final lap. But now I know not to do that again. And so I threw myself out a lot of situations, and I've really learned a lot from it. I'm fortunate to be the Black Student Athlete President when I graduate. That's a really nice achievement to have, just to be able to be an advocate and for my community, for the Black Student Athletes here at the University of Washington, to give them a voice, be an outlet for them, and also just create a welcoming space where they feel seen and valued for not just the jerseys that they put on, but for the people they are and the people that they're going to become. And so, yeah, I think I've learned those kind of 3 lessons of just being patient and throwing myself at stuff, trying to be fearless. There's always a little bit of fear. You've got to be apprehensive and protect yourself.
I was just about to say, in order to be brave, there's always going to be fear.
For sure.
It's just whether or not you're just going to move past that. You can recognize it, but it really shows what type of person you are. What is your major at University of Washington?
I am studying psychology and sociology, kind of a double major. I came in wanting to do psych, the BS, and I saw how big the classes were, and I was like, I really want to be in a space where I can engage. The only experience I've had with American universities is just seeing them on films, and there seem to be all these discussion-based classes rather than lectures, and I was like, I want to have that experience. So I jumped into a couple of AFRAM classes, which led me to some social classes, and so I spoke to my advisor. I was like, how can I do this as a major alongside my psych? We worked it out, and now I'm working twice as hard to get a degree, but it's worth it.
Why did you choose those fields?
Psychology, not because I want to go into sports science, but because psychology, neurolinguistic programming, self-talk, performance, sports psych, they've all played a role in who I've become and who I want to become as well. And so I think naturally just being surrounded by that through my mother and in sports, I was always interested in psychology. And sociology, I have a passion for advocacy. I think representation matters. I think I know my identity as a black man. I'm mixed race as well, but I see myself as an Afro-British person. I think there's a lot of stuff that is happening around the world, and therefore being able to understand social dynamics, social movements, help me understand more about myself and where I fit into those puzzles of learning about the world. And so hence why I picked up both majors, and they intertwine very nicely, because psychology, you look at the individual, and sociology, you look at the masses, the majority, and being able to merge both, you can see how a social movement such as Black Lives Matter or Black Power movement or an LGBTQ plus movement can impact individuals, whether it be negative and positive. And having a mindset around both like that, I'm able to really understand how to strategically communicate messages if I want to really push myself into those routes a bit more.
Yeah, go into identity and those strategies.
The first time I really toyed around with the idea of identity was when I was injured. I always go back to that point just because I always saw myself as Jamie the athlete, and then when I didn't have my sport for a year and a bit, I learned that, okay, maybe I'm not Jamie the athlete. And so, who am I in that process? I learned that identity can be a fluid thing, that your identity when you're 8 is different to your identity when you're 18 to then when you're 28. And so, I've learned how I fit into the identity of myself, but how society's going to try and attribute an identity to me, and whether I'm happy with that. Sometimes society will say you're a certain person and you might not feel like that, and that's totally okay. And just how you figure your own way around it is your unique process and your growth. And so identity is an important factor. It helps me personally understand the shoulders I'm standing on. There's some significant black figures that have helped me become the person I am and allowed me the space to go and do the things I do. And so I think identity acknowledges you, but also acknowledges how society sees you.
I love that.
Thank you.
The narratives that people put on you, and I've experienced it, everyone experiences that. How do you break free from the narratives?
I think it depends how you want to break free. If you really feel like society's misjudging you, you've got to double down on the person you want to be. You've also sometimes got to ask yourself, are you being the right person?
It involves a little bit of risk.
Yeah, it does, because the person you might want to be might not be how society wants you to be. And you've got to be prepared to acknowledge that there's going to be way more obstacles in the way. If you're prepared for that journey, go ahead and take it. But also, if there's certain things you want to do, and if you want to have a certain path of life, if you want to have an access to privileges or less privileges, those are the choices you might have to make if society attributes a certain identity to you that you're not happy with. And, you see that with certain communities and even certain racial groups, that people see themselves differently to how society sees them. And it's an acknowledgement thing. Do you want to double down and really home in on who you are? Or are you going to try and make it work for you and make society be happy with that kind of amalgamation, assimilation person? And it's each to their own. It's an individual process. I know I code switch a lot just because it makes it easier for me. Like when I moved from the UK here to Seattle, some people just didn't understand my slang, and rather than doubling down and speaking more slang in the UK, I learned to make myself a little bit more palatable for the American tongue. And so, yeah, that's something I did just to make it easier for people to understand me. I didn't want to have to repeat myself, and so that's one thing I did. But I know some people will, double down and just be like, if you don't understand me, that's your loss. It reminds me actually of a time when I was in Valencia in Spain, when my Spanish is rubbish. So don't ask me any questions. But when I was in Valencia, everyone was telling me that if you don't speak Spanish, they're not going to help you. They're not going to speak English. If you want to order ice cream, you're going to have to learn how to point at what thing you want. So either you're going to have to learn how to conform to their Spanish ideals or speak the language, or double down and be English and struggle to communicate when you're there. And so that's just a depiction of how society can sometimes not work for you, or you can make it work for you.
It's all about breaking conformity.
That's
if
true.
you believe in yourself. Where's Valencia, by the way?
Valencia is in the south of Spain.
Where else have you been in the U.S.?
I have been, my freshman year, we did California, North Carolina, Oregon. Then I've been to the Bay Area. Actually, yeah, that's California. Then I've also done Houston, done Boston. No, sorry, not Boston. Baltimore, New York. I think those are all the places. And Miami. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And Seattle.
Yeah. What do you think about Seattle? I mean, it gets this, like, people who think about Seattle, they kind of think of the unfriendly environment.
Mhm.
They think about, some say unfriendly, some people say a more introverted community.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? When you first came into Seattle, what was your experience? How has it changed for you?
See, I think I'm more East Coast and more European, and I see myself more there just because we're even more unfriendly and we keep to ourselves a lot more. What surprised me, my first day here, I went to go get a SIM card at the T-Mobile shop in U Village.
Okay.
And literally, I'm just there doing my thing, and a stranger comes to me, and they did the cliche thing of, oh, I love your accent, where are you from? They all want to know my life story of, oh, what brought you here? Oh, the university. And then you're doing all this, and British people were always polite, so we'll happily entertain it, but in the back of our minds, we're like, oh, please, God.
That's so funny.
I just want to
the
get...
The British accent strikes again, right?
And we try to be polite, but it's like, I just want to buy my SIM card, please. And so I'm a fan of the just keep to yourself situation, and I don't think they do enough of it here. Maybe it's because I'm an international and I have an accent, but yeah, I'm used to being on the train and somebody's doing some, they might be urinating on the seat 3 seats down from me, and I just keep to myself. I go on my phone, pretend it's not happening. Versus, like, I think anywhere else, people would you should say something really, but we're just so engrossed in our own lives in Europe, in Seattle, in the UK, that we ignore that kind of stuff. And so, whereas Seattle has always been very like, let me get to know you, let me know your story, let me know this, which, I've
that's actually different than what I've heard. So that's interesting.
But I've learned to appreciate it. I mean, it's allowed me the entrance into multiple different spaces as a result. So I'm grateful for it. But it was a shock because you don't engage like that when you're where I'm from.
What are some of your favorite cities in the U.S. other than Seattle? You would say?
I really love the Bay Area, just because I have family there, and it's just a good city. I did LA recently, and like actually saw it outside of competing on track meets. I got to visit it with my girlfriend, and I love that. I went to go see the Coliseum, helped me manifest some of my goals for 2028 possibly. Mm-hmm. I love that. And then just New York as well. I love the fast pace, I love city living. I always want to be in skyscraper urban environments, and kind of New York gives me that feel. It's very similar to London. So I enjoyed that. And so those are the kind of three that stood out to me.
Yeah, prayers to all the people in LA.
Yeah.
They're going through that right now.
Sure.
Yeah, I think they've had 10 people who have passed away so far, and it's just the Palisades. It's been total destruction. You've probably seen that.
So the videos have been very, very morbid, and like you said, prayers go out to them. I think there's, it's a situation where we should take away the politics and economics and just think about humanity, similar to what's going on across the globe. It's just how good of a human do you want to be in those situations? What involvement can we have? And so that's just how I see it. There's people will always try to politicize something. Even in sports, there's politics, and it shouldn't be there. But this is just a key moment, and I encourage any individual who might be listening to this to just think about humanity in situations like that. What can be done? What can be done? What can we do? And when you put humanity in front of everything, you see the person, you see the people hurting, and you see the loved ones there for you as well.
Yeah, we've seen guys like Elon Musk who've been contributing with free online. Starlink, I'm pretty sure, is providing services free to the people. And even locally for me, I grew up on Bainbridge Island.
Yeah.
They have the firefighting team. The department on the island is actually training a team, driving all the way down to help out over there.
That's true. There's communities that always come together in situations like this, and communities sometimes all that we have, and so it's important to really nurture those. And yeah, I think what people are trying to do is good. We've seen similar reactions in Ukraine and stuff, and so yeah, I think communities come together in crisis, but we should also learn from crisis and think, how can we ensure that community keeps showing up even when there isn't a crisis, when it's just for love.
Let's travel back in time a little bit to the COVID pandemic. COVID had a huge impact on everyone, and even talking about the social anxiety, COVID contributed tremendously to that, and anxiety in general. What were you going through at that time?
I was nearing the end of my high school time, and in that transition phase of finding my colleges. So I was mainly just at home, we at boarding school. It was actually really weird, I'll be honest, because we got sent home for part of COVID, and we were just at home. But then when the pandemic dropped and we were able to go back to normal life for a bit, we went back to school, and then lockdown happened again. And then we were in lockdown while in the boarding school, which honestly I loved, because now you're with your friends and not living on top of each other with family. You're living on top of your mates, so that was a little bit more fun. But it was interesting because we had all these, not TV crews. We were publicized a lot because somebody had put a thing out saying the most expensive place to be in lockdown, and they put our boarding school, the gates of it, on the BBC News, and it went viral in the UK, just because we were literally in lockdown, but still in school and boarding school, and so that was really ironic.
Wow,
yeah.
Just an experience to have. You were with all the boys.
Yeah.
Was that a good time? Probably.
Yeah, I loved it. 'Cause, I mean, we'd have times where we'd come back. They all arrived back, and so we all at boarding school, and they were like, "Yeah, country's going into lockdown," and they thought, "Well, I can't go home because just pay for my flight to come back. I'm hanging around here."
Yeah.
And so we had a couple of days where we were just online school, which is awesome. And then anytime there was somebody who felt a little bit ill, you didn't even have to test positive.
Wow.
But the whole boarding house would go into lockdown.
Oh man.
And then we had online school, and they'd have to cater food to our house, which is even more fun because we wouldn't have to get changed into suits. That's our school uniform.
Yeah.
We just stay in our pajamas and hang out the whole day, which was great. And then also, it got to the point where in COVID you just wanted to go back to school. And so now you're able to be at school with these, obviously unfortunate, uncertain times, but you're with your friends rather than your family. That was part of it where I did really enjoy it. It was good fun, for sure.
Yeah, for me it was pretty different. I was in high school, sophomore, junior year, and the pandemic hit, and I would go home, but I had a neighbor who was one of my really close friends, and I would hang out with him a lot. So I got to hang out with my buddies a lot of the time, but once we came back, I just remember, because it was public school, it was spaced, the seats were spaced, we were all wearing masks, everyone was feeling pretty bad, and shots were prioritized. For some schools required it, and mine did, and some people chose to not go to school at all because of the requirement of the vaccines. Some people had other opinions.
It was interesting hearing the narrative because, in the UK we're very fortunate, we have public healthcare, and so healthcare is free, so we're used to getting free things from our national health services versus from, in the States, anything free from medical stuff is always really strange. And I can totally understand it. If you search up the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, that was an experiment which tested on black fighter jet pilots, and so they were given a free treatment, but actually it was a drug to give them syphilis. Of course, it's going to leave certain communities scarred when it comes to getting free healthcare because they're thinking, well, this didn't benefit us many years ago. How are we going to be sure that this vaccine is going to benefit us now? And so, the narrative around free healthcare and getting stuff free from health services has always been interesting here versus back home in the UK.
Well, what is that called? The fighter?
Oh, Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
Yeah. When was that? What happened with that?
Oh, I don't even remember the dates now, but it was an experiment where basically they wanted the American Health Service or wanted to understand the side effects and the effects of syphilis on the body. And so what they did is they unbeknowingly gave syphilis to Tuskegee pilots who were black fighter jet pilots at the time in Tuskegee. I think that's in Alabama. Correct me if I'm wrong for sure. But they were given syphilis, and then they were basically just noted what was going on in their bodies, how the body deteriorated. They didn't even give the vaccine to those pilots after. They let them literally die out. And by then the vaccine was already out, so they could cure the syphilis, but they literally wanted to note what the body would go through during that syphilis experiment. And so they did it on these pilots, and that was again a free drug that was handed out to them, and it's left African American communities scarred since.
With the COVID vaccines, there's been so many different symptoms. People have been just filing different complaints about what's been going on, and it makes it really hard to trust the healthcare in America.
I can see where the American population might be coming from for sure.
I guess it was a pretty decent time for you then during
It was a decent time in the sense of we're fortunate. Millfield is fortunate to have some very good endowments, and so therefore mitigations that were set in place was very well supported. We were able to mask and do the necessary things to be a safe school during the COVID pandemic, and so therefore the mental struggle for me was very different. I don't think it was even a struggle at that point because I was just living day-to-day school. The only difference is sometimes is my teachers wouldn't be able to make it in because they were showing symptoms, and so therefore all 13 of us would be in class and then the teacher would be on an iPad.
Is it a big campus?
It's a pretty big campus, yeah. It's like part of the campus you have to take a bus to get to the other side of the campus sometimes.
And you guys did Zoom as well when the teacher couldn't show up? Because that's what it was like for me and my classmates. It was like all Zoom.
Yeah.
And at that point, I wasn't as, I'd say, disciplined as I am now. So I didn't take those very seriously.
Yeah.
Classic sleeping during the thing, and they would call on your name and.
Yeah. But they were harsh on us because we had to be in person at that point. Or one of the reasons why sometimes people go to private schools in the UK is because class sizes are smaller, and so the max class size you'd have at Millfield is 14 or 13, and so therefore teachers really get to know you well, and so therefore, they'll make sure you wake up, or if you're not awake in class, you'll hear it from somebody else, and they took it very seriously. I mean, I had to take proper formalized exams, and because they would grade on a curve, people obviously, you can't deny people did open book, closed book exams, and so. Therefore, these grading curves were way, way higher and harder, and so therefore, to mitigate people cheating, is they set more essay questions in their tests, because now not only have you got to know the content, but you've got to be able to translate it into a really good, legible essay. And so, they were very smart with how they try to push us and get the best out of us. And higher education in the UK is also very different. You can only apply to 5 universities, and then from those 5 applications, you can only select 2.
Okay.
And so therefore, you've got to make sure you're on your game when you're graduating those last few years of high school, because you can't have unlimited choices. You only have 5, and then you have to narrow it down to 2. And so it's very fierce. And so Millfield definitely pushed us to the max, but also made sure that we were able to be students in that process as well.
So take me in the day in the life, routine and balance. I love to hear about a typical day for you right now.
Probably do a Monday. I wake up at 6:25. Well, alarm goes off at 6:35. I roll out of bed at 6:35, get ready, get showered, and I get to the facility, or take the bus at 7:17. So I leave my house about 7:10, get to the facility around 7:30, 7:20 something, have breakfast, which will usually, again, consist of oatmeal porridge with peanut butter, and then just get that down. We start training at 9 o'clock on a Monday. I like to get that 8:45 now. I'm a senior. My body feels very crooked and old, so having to get it warmed up before we even start the warm-up is now a thing I have to do. So I get training at 8:45. It's a hurdles day, so warm-up's a bit longer because you got to have absurd flexibility to be able to get over those 42-inch hurdles.
A lot of stretching.
Yeah, a lot of dynamic stretching. So I never do just a cold stretch. I'll do stretches which open up my body, but not in a way that I'm loosening the muscles. That's what stretching does. It loosens the muscles. I want my muscles to kind of be a little bit more, just flexible in general, so then they can fire back. If you straighten your leg out, you want to be able to pull it back immediately as well. And so, I get through my warm-up. We'll train probably 9 till about 10:30, 11. Then we'll go lift, and then I'll finish my kind of training regimen around 12 o'clock. Go to have my lunch, go to class, come back to the training room after just to attend anything I need to, if it's getting a calf flush or doing some stim on my body, and then dinner around 6:37. In between that time, I'll also just cram time to study, 7 to 8 dinner, and then head home, a bit more studying, and then go to bed, latest 10:30. On the weekends, I'll push it back, especially on days when I don't have to train. So Friday night, I'll definitely stay up a little bit later, if I can muster it, because usually those are our hardest sessions, but that's a typical day, I'd say.
Give me a difference between a busy and a less busy day.
I think every weekday is busy. So a less busy day is probably like a Saturday. So today, I would wake up when I want, making sure I just maxed out my sleep to minimum at least 8 hours, have a nice slow steady breakfast, usually a breakfast that consists of, I try to cut carbs that morning and just have a more of a protein, vegetable-filled breakfast. I did cheat a little bit today. I had biscuits and hash browns, which went down great, but now I don't feel great afterwards. I feel better, but that's all right. And then usually it's just, I use Saturday to literally just switch off. I'll even push back studying till the evening just because I want to be able just to relax. Yeah, it's what I want to be able to relax, kick up, do what I want to do. If my mind wants to wander for a bit and get out of U district area, I'll do that. I just leave it very open. If people want to make plans with me, I usually suggest Saturdays.
How important is like nutrition, hydration, and your sleep? How do you go about those things? How do you make sure you're properly hydrated? And do you have a nutritionist?
We do have a nutritionist. I work with her mainly to measure my body fat percentage. We do something called a DEXA scan at different parts of our season to see how much of our body weight is fat versus muscle. And so I'll work with her with that. We're fortunate to have our athlete dining plans, and so therefore all the food is kind of catered for us, and you kind of know what you should eat when you're in that dining hall. There's a salad counter, there's your main protein counter, your carb counter, so you kind of know where you should go, and all of it is genuinely very good quality, so you know you're getting the best nutrition out of it. I think sleep is obviously a valuable thing, but it's a very unique process. Some people say they need to wake up at the crack of dawn at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. to feel productive, but I would describe myself as a morning person when necessary, not when optional.
Yeah.
You know, like if I can sleep in, I'd rather sleep in. If you want me to be up at training, I'll wake up a lot earlier because I need to get my body ready to go. But I think one of the things I've recently added to my sleep routine is the last thing I want to hear or see is stuff related to the things I want to achieve. And so I'll either journal, but I don't journal in the sense of how my day went. I journal specific training notes.
Okay.
If there was a specific cube we were working on, whether it be in the pole vault, using my left arm a bit more, or in the hurdles, keeping my leg tighter as I come down off the hurdle, I'll kind of write what I was thinking about in that training session. And when I'm doing that, I'm visualizing what I was doing in that session in order to translate it into words into my training diary. So I'll either do that, or sometimes just listening to, I'm not a big reader, I do audiobooks, and just listening to an audiobook or something that is providing me with quality information that I can kind of go to sleep with. So then the last thing I have to think about is I'm putting healthy stuff into my mind before I go to sleep. When it's the weekend, put anything in my mind when it comes to just watching a film, watching TV, social media, but I try to really just stick to a routine. And sometimes even better, if I only do that if I can't get to sleep. If I can just get knocked out at 10 o'clock or 9:45, I'm going to take that because I'd rather get the sleep over, listening to something before I go to bed. So.
Sounds like you get around like 8 to 9 hours of sleep.
I try to. I mean, the apps on my phone definitely help me. I've just used the health app, and that kind of tells me how to get my 8 hours in. So just do that and follow that pretty religiously, I'd say.
And probably stay away from your phone before you go to bed.
I do. I mean, I'm not scrolling on Instagram, but if there's something I need to quickly... Sometimes, because my day is so packed, sometimes I'll have an epiphany of, oh my god, I need to reply to this, or I need to send this email. I might do that then, but I rarely scroll through Instagram. And even if I do catch myself doing it, I'll be like, no, you shouldn't do it, put your phone down. So yeah. One of the things I do also do is, my phone charger isn't next to my bed. I have to actually get out of bed to plug my phone in, and so that's going to help me prevent scrolling, because I'm thinking, I'm comfy here, I don't want to,
That's a really good way of doing it. Yeah. I should probably do that.
Now I plug my phone in and I get comfy in my bed. I'll be like, okay, I'm good. Versus lying in my bed scrolling, like now I have to get out and do all this process again. I do it mainly out of convenience, but it kind of also helps me in the process of having a routine.
With the journaling, do you do that throughout the day, or are you mostly doing that towards the end of the day, in the evening?
I have 2 journaling books. I have one I call my Mindset Journal, which is just a small black book I carry in my tote bag. And so if there's anything I'm thinking of, or if there's a quote I heard, something I heard in class, which is like, wow, I'll quickly write that down. But then my training diary, I write at the end of training. So not the end of training, at the end of the day.
That's just all the different details when you're analyzing yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll have my video training sometimes, so I'll look at the video back and do that as well. So for some video analysis and, okay, what did I do in this hurdles run? Oh, I did this differently. I worked my arm. I turn my feet over, and I'll write that down in my training diary. But my mental diary, I keep that in my tote bag. And like I said, if there's anything I see, any stimuli that inspire me, motivate me, or a quote I liked, quickly note it down. Yeah.
I like that. Do you have somebody who also is sending you those videos, and do they have like bullet points or little notes on the side that tells you more like, hey, Jamie, 15 seconds, we noticed that your foot moved this way or something? Or is it mostly up to you and you've already had the training?
I'll say in training we'll use video feedback and we'll look, over this hurdle you did this wrong, and I'll just remember that. I know in American football sometimes some of the guys, they literally have their playbooks almost aligned with the iPad that they're watching their film on and say, at minute 42 you were supposed to mark this defender but you left and went to this side. We don't have that as much. I just try to remember what I can from the training session and note that down in my
So during the training session, the coach is telling you...
Yeah, immediate feedback.
Oh, great.
Literally, like, he could give me even more immediate feedback, but I still have to walk back after my reps, so it gives me time to just catch my breath.
You get feedback every day, you say?
Every day.
Every day,
yeah. The only day I wouldn't get feedback is a day I'm doing is Sunday, and that's just a distance run, and I don't really get coached in that. That's just, you got to go run for 20 minutes, 25 minutes just to get your heart rate up and allow your body to kind of actively recover.
Give me an example of one of those details.
A training detail that I've worked on recently is in the long jump. Anytime you want to jump, your body prepares to jump. And sometimes in long jump that can work adversely for you, because when you prepare to jump, you slow down, you start to hunker down to really lift your body up. But the best long jumpers are the jumpers who almost treat it like a sprint. And so I've been trying to be more like a sprinter on the runway. I have an 18-step run, so I'll make sure I have a nice relaxed push, then being able to stand up. But then after I've stood up and started bouncing in the run-up, the last kind of 6 steps of my run-up, I really focus on just being tall and behaving like a sprinter and making the jump be the last thought in that process. Because sometimes if we're long jumping or jumping in general, we want to start getting ready when we're 18 steps back from the takeoff, but really only 2 steps out I start thinking, okay, now we jump. And so, just behaving more like a sprinter on that runway and utilizing my natural speed that I've been developing over the years.
Tell me about the motivation journal, or
the mental journals.
The mental journals.
I started it, especially this year, working with my performance coach, because we used to work in person, and so he'd print out papers for me and stuff we'd discuss, or he'd send me a link on my phone, and he still sends the links every now and then. But now we're working virtually just because he's gone on to another university, another journey, and so massively support that and what he's achieving out there. But I wanted to make sure I stay in touch and get the most out of our sessions, and so therefore I've just started noting down things that I like that he said, or things that I like that I said to him. And then since then I was like, why don't I just carry this book with me, because there's a lot of other things that inspire me. And so I just write stuff down like that.
It's so important to keep those journals. I did that too. You can always look back and really reflect where you were, and it just helps you kind of stack up when you start with the foundational level and to just see how you develop mentally. For a really long time, freshman, sophomore year, on my iPad, I would just journal every single day before I went to bed. So I was doing something very similar to you. And it's great to have those whenever you want to look back. Now I've changed, because when I have a thought or I see something motivational or somebody just gives me some interesting insight, I'll write it down. I text myself on iMessage. I just text myself, and it's fast, efficient, right then and there, and then I'll write it down later when I get home and stuff. But when I'm on the go, it's the first thing I do. So how would you describe yourself personality-wise?
I try to always be very selfless, because when I take myself out of the equation, I'm able to understand the individual a little bit more. I really love human connections and getting to know people, and I try to erase everything that's going around in the situation so I can directly focus on that person. And so I try to always be selfless when it comes to love, my mother, with my significant other, because I want to, if you always put yourself first, you won't be able to really get to know the other person for who they are and what they're trying to sometimes communicate with you. So I'll say selfless, driven, just because of my spawn. That's just ingrained that in me.
Are you different when you're with other people or when you're alone? Are you calm?
Yeah, I think actually that kind of ties to my final trait. I think I try to always be consistent. I said to my girlfriend when we first started dating, I aim to be the person you met this day, the day ours, we start taking it seriously. I aim to be that person you meet then, to be the same person now. Obviously grown and everything like that and more matured, but like the way I love, the way I care for you, that will always remain consistent. The focus I have on you, and I try to be like that as well in my life, in the sense of the person who shows up at the door when he's ready for training is the same person who shows up at the door when he's going to go greet his mum when he's back in the UK, that Jami is always going to be there, because that Jami is focused, driven, selfless. He always tries to remain grounded. Sometimes my feet can leave the ground because I'm very fortunate to be in such amazing places, and I want to be able to tell people, but I want to be able to tell people in a way that shows that I'm also grateful for the situation, that this situation arrived because of hard work, not because it was just presented to me on a silver platter. And so, yeah, I want to be, and always strive to be consistent in my life, and that's something I always keep at the heart of things I do, is this consistent with Jami's attitude and Jami's values, and okay, if it's not, is this something he wants to change, and will this become the new consistency? But I make sure those changes don't happen too often, because then you're just an inconsistent person, of course.
How do you navigate around stress?
The immediate answer would be I just dig it deep till I drop it, but that's obviously not the most healthiest thing.
I hear so many different perspectives on stress. For me, like, I feel like stress is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you, at least in that perspective, if you
Yeah.
see it as an illusion, it has less of an effect on you.
It's true.
What do you think about stress? What do you think about stress?
I can see how you see it as an illusion. I think stress for me is definitely a real thing, and I make it a real thing because I want to also be able to control it. And so maybe that's how I can also tie it to your illusions, because you can control whether things are real or not in that illusion. But I attribute a value to it because there's something clearly on my mind and it's not helping me, so what is it? And so by me being able to control the stress, whether it be I need to just take myself out of the situation, or do I need to focus more on the situation so then I have more knowledge around it, being able to really identify and acknowledge what that stress and the cause of it is has helped me combat it. Obviously, even in competing, you have performance anxiety, and how you mitigate that. I do it through breathing techniques. I do it also through when I'm preparing to go to certain events and occasions, I ready myself for the event. And especially when you go to new tracks, you want to know, I try to figure out what the color of the track is, what does the infield look like, where are they going to set up certain things, so that when I arrive, everything's just like I visualized and imagined. And you'll see Formula One drivers do that kind of stuff a lot. You know, you have a stress of, okay, I need to arrive at the Silverstone Grand Prix. It's my first time racing here, but you know, you can search up the track online and you can figure out what curves are there, when to start turning, what the best racing lines are, and you start visualizing those processes. So then when you arrive, the stress is a little bit less than what it could have been.
Yeah.
Stress will still always come. Stress is also enhances your performance, because when you have a little bit of stress and anxiety, you kind of get a little bit into that fight or flight mode, and if you're there, oh, great things are about to happen. So you don't want to fully get rid of it, but you want to acknowledge it, because then you can control it.
The anxiety, or some people say excitability, that's really where you can start turning
That's
the
true.
gears. Yeah, so the breathing techniques, those are no joke, because they're scientifically proven to lower the cortisol. Could you take us through like one of those? I've actually mentioned it before in my podcast.
No, the like obvious one as well. Like even if you got, you know, we can't always measure our cortisol levels, but what you can feel is your heart rate. And so in a stressful situation, you feel your heart pounding. You feel it getting faster when you're stressed, but you can also know what it feels like when it's slow. And so what I'll do is I'll remember what that slow pace feels like. And when I'm in a stressful situation, so let's say in an event, really it comes to me just before the 100 meters, because that's the start of your decathlon. It's the start of your 2-day campaign to be a champion. And so I'll ground myself. I'll take off my spikes if I can, if I have the time to, or I'll put my hand on the track and I'll feel the bumps and grooves of the track. And I always describe the track as being cooler than I am. So I'm going to take in the coolness of the track and send out the heat of the stress. Because when something is stressful, you're usually hot, you get sweaty, don't you? Mm-hmm. And when you're cool, you know, it's chilled, it's very relaxed. And so I take in that coolness on an inhale, and I feel it absorb through my arms, just a cool breeze of, you know, it could be blood, water, or air. I take it through my hand, through my arms, through my chest, maybe into my head, play around, I let it move around my body. And then on the exhale, I send out the hot air, and I send out the hot air from every pore I have in my body. And I use pores because, you know, they open up and close when you're hot or cold. And when you're hot, they want to open because they want to get that heat out. And so I'll feel the pores on my face releasing that heat as I'm doing the exhale. And then I go through that technique again. Feel the coolness come in, and exhaling the heat out of the pores. And I'll do that. And as I'm doing that, I'm also telling myself, feel, Jami, as you're in that process, your heart rate come down. Feel it drop to your resting heart rate as you bring it down to your comfort zone, to that optimum competition level. and I'll keep doing it. And I use a lot of I ams as well in that process because, you know, that's the best language you can use. That's the most present language you can have. And so I am chill, I am cool, I'm prepared, I'm focused. And so yeah, that's how I'll kind of do. Specifically, a lot more pre-race. Like we even scheduled 10 minutes just before the start for me to just take off my spikes, use the bathroom when I need to, and then yeah, do my techniques.
So, talking with you before, I know we share similar beliefs regarding living a sober lifestyle. What made you choose that way of life?
I think just alcohol. I didn't like the person I wasn't. I wasn't like a heavy drinker, but the one proper occasion I had with that, I was like, oh no, I don't like this. I can't control myself. I slur my words. I like to always be very prim and proper. That's one thing that British boarding schools always taught me. And so, if I can't uphold the standards that my mum has paid a lot of money for me to learn, then I'm just letting myself down. And so that was the initial thought around not wanting to drink. If I want to have a victory drink, it would be after the season, but not to get sloshed, just to celebrate or to compliment the food I'm having. But also it's just that athletic thing of your body's a temple, and for me it mentally tells me I'm giving myself an edge and an advantage that other people might not be able to have. I know some guys who say, oh yeah, drinking doesn't affect me, I use it as like a depressant to just calm me down and bring me and mellow myself out. For me it's like, you know, I see it as so negative that I don't want it anywhere near my body, and therefore I push it aside and just try to keep it clean as much as I can.
It makes sense. You would try to get any competitive advantage, any edge.
Even if it's mental, like drinking might not always affect all the athletes that they do, but in my head I could line up next to somebody and be like, oh, I know you had a drink 4 weeks ago, and it's probably out of their system scientifically, but in my head, oh yeah, it's deep in his system. Matter of fact, it's in his hamstrings. He's not going to run as fast as me now. That's that mental edge that you want to have over your competitors, that thing that
sure
it's not always written, it's not scientific, but it's believable to you, and that can take you some great places.
Is there anyone you work with who helps you stay focused and motivated?
I work with my performance coach, but just the village around me that I have right now keeps me focused and motivated. From my coach, my mother, my girlfriend, my performance coach, and just being surrounded by a very high achieving team. Like the University of Washington track team is back-to-back Pac-12 champions. We're chasing our first Big Ten title as well, first year in the Big Ten. So when you're surrounded by guys like that, although track is an individual sport, there is a team total and a team score to achieve that can give you a team championship. And you know, now I'm standing along my brothers to go get them a final championship before we all graduate. And so that requires a certain kind of attentiveness, a certain kind of focus. And so, you know, if I'm not here to let myself down, I'm not here to let my teammates down, so I've got to hold myself to a higher standard.
I think it's really interesting when you're trying to quit an addiction, the inner battle that you have, the inner war between your inner voice, it has a striking comparison to athletics. It all comes down to your competitive drive, I would argue. How badly do you want something, and how badly do you want to improve? But what truly makes someone a winner is their love for these internal battles that life ignites. It goes back to what you were talking about really in the beginning about pain and how people take on pain and if they embrace it or not. Because the people who are going to go at the highest level, they're gonna face pain and actually enjoy the pain that life brings. So it's just loving the process, loving the journey, and continuing to grow and push through adversity and obstacles. How does that influence your relationships and social activities?
I mean, when I go to the club, I'm always the designated driver, so like I don't.
Yeah, same here. I've been in that situation plenty of times.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get a really nice car to drive.
That's true. I don't have a car here, so if somebody says, "Oh, you can drive my car," oh, say less. I won't drink anything. Just give me water, man.
Yeah.
So no, I prefer the person I am when I'm not drunk. I'm very sober in myself, and so therefore, yeah, I prefer not to drink when I go out. Drive a nice car if I can on the way back, and I still have a great time with the guys. I don't get hammered anyway, but yeah, it's never been something I chase. I really only go out to dance and have fun with my boys, and so yeah, the motive to drink isn't there for me when I go out.
You've never had any struggles with making connections or anything like that? You've just been probably pretty confident and grounded. And
I would say, I think so. I think also perhaps being an only child, this might be like an only child superpower that we might have, is just because we have no one to play with growing up, we have to learn how to ask random people, hey, can I play? Can I jump in? Do you need a third? I had to do that a lot, and so I just learned how to socialize as best I could, and my mum massively helped me with it, especially when it came to talking to girls. Probably worst / best advice she gave me was make the conversation less about yourself and more about them. So if it's a percentage, you talk 20% and let them talk 80%. And so I apply that rule as much as I can, especially if I'm in a space where I just want to be a sponge and absorb the information, ask questions, give my little due diligence of an answer, but really I'm here to learn about the person, and so give them their 80% to really get to know them.
Yeah, I'm an only child too. I didn't know that about you.
There we go. That's a superpower right there, man. I joke with my mom. I said, you got it right the first time. There's no need to find a replacement for me. So
Yeah. Are there any athletes you admire?
There's two. Ashton Eaton, who's an American decathlete, and then another gentleman named Daley Thompson, who's a decathlete from the UK. He's a British record holder. He was the world record holder at the time. He won actually in the LA Olympics. I think that might have been in '84. I might be incorrect, or '86. But one of the reasons why when I was in LA, I went to go see the Coliseum, because that's where my hero, Daley Thompson, won one of his decathlons, and so I had to see him in person. Didn't get to go inside, obviously, but I saw from the outside and saw the Olympic rings, which is more interesting for me than the American football side of it. But him, and then also, if it's sports, a gentleman named John Amici. He's a basketball player, played for Orlando. He's now a psychologist. He came from Manchester, went to Penn State, played in the NBA, and now he's just a full-time psychologist. Really teaches a lot of interesting lessons around diversity, equity, and inclusion, advocacy, representation, but also he's a performance coach in the sense of how to really get the best out of your corporate colleagues in a corporate setting, in the sense of whether it be leadership skills, team building, or pulling out, or showing up for somebody as well. And so yeah, he's just somebody who's just really interesting. He's kind of made that transition and pivoted across from sport, and what he does is not even tied at all to sport. I mean, if you hear him talk about basketball, he doesn't speak very highly of what he did. He said, I literally for 20 years of my life put a ball through a net. And then he focuses on psychology. And so I think he's awesome. I love speaking to him. And he was somebody who really came to my peripheral when in 2018, 2019, when he made spoke about the difference between being a racist and an anti-racist, and he just did it so eloquently. I said, I have to meet this person. And I fortunately did.
Let's talk about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What type of person do you have to be a leader? There's a bravery aspect to it,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an ability to adapt to different situations too.
Yeah.
It makes me think about what you've told me already so far about you've traveled so much, you've had to adapt to so many different environments, as well as, if we really want to talk about language, learning another language makes you adapt to and getting into cultures and all of that. Adaptability is super important.
Yeah, I think, just like you say, adaptability is valuable in leadership. I think as well, being able to really be vulnerable. I think a good leader is always very vulnerable because they know what their weaknesses are, and then they employ or seek the kind of best talent to help address those weaknesses. If you know you cannot do maths, find somebody in your company who can do maths, because they'll most likely boost the weak side of the company arm that you might be struggling with. And so I think good leaders are very vulnerable in their areas of weakness. I think as well, a good leader is somebody who's able to level with someone. And, in any corporate setting, in society, there's always going to be scales of hierarchy. And I think the best leaders are able to ignore the scales and bring themselves to the level that person is at, and really meet them on their level, whether it be from language, social status, economic status. They're able to eliminate those things, or bring themselves to that level, not down to, bring themselves to that level to be able to really understand the individual. And when you understand an individual, you're able to support them in the best way. And I think that's a good leader's talent. I think when somebody's able to do that, be vulnerable, be adaptable, and have the skill to bring themselves to certain levels to meet people, I think is a really cool thing to showcase as a good leader.
For sure. When you go down to that level, when a leader does that, shows their ability to teach another individual.
It's true, and it's difficult using the language because I hate to use the word down. I think everyone is on their own level. And it might just be platform, jump across to their platform rather than just always staying on theirs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think a leader is able to make those jumps and bounds to be able to meet those people on their platforms rather than dropping down or up levels in order to do that. Because I think hierarchy gets always very complicated, gets very foggy.
People are multifaceted.
Yeah, and so yeah. But no, a good leader is able to make those leaps and bounds to those different platforms for sure.
I think another thing you said that was a great point was leaders find a community that they surround themselves with people, like-minded individuals that boost each other. Like you were talking about somebody who's struggling in maths, they're gonna go out of their way to find that community to become a better person or advance their skill set. It reminds me, like, give me your 3 closest friends. Those are the sort of people you're gonna be like at the end of life. It tells a lot about who you hang out with and that influence it has on the rest of your life. How do you tailor your relationships?
That old analogy of show me your friends and I'll show you your net worth. I try not to think about that too much. I think I don't want to think about it in money, but if I could translate net worth into the values and the happiness I want to have, then we can use the word net worth. But I'm not. When I talk net worth, I don't want to talk money.
I guess I kind of put my own I put my own thing on there. It's not really net worth, but
for sure, I think I attribute it to who lifts me up and who elevates me, who holds me accountable, and who demands excellence out of me the most. And that I'm fortunate to have quite a few friends and some very close ones as well. And I feel like I might do a disservice by forgetting them. So I'm going to try my best to remember them. You asked for 3. The 3 that came to mind is a guy named Bruno Comin Pescador, who's another decathlete teammate of mine. A guy named Simon Park, who's another teammate of mine, and Tom Bradley, who went to Milford with me. These are guys who are my day ones, and there's more of them as well that I want to list. And so I had to narrow them down to 3. There's no order in that 3, and there's no order with the rest of them. But those are guys who constantly push excellence out of me and also allow me to. They give me grace when I make a mistake, but make sure they put me back on the straight and narrow to not do it again. Those are guys who do that for you are guys that you want to have around you. Somebody said to me once, I demand excellence out of everyone around me. And it was very strict and very matter of fact, but it's true. If you can push your people to get excellence out of you, they'll most likely push you to get excellence out of yourself. And so I want to be around people like that because in the decathlon you want to chase perfection. In life you want to get as close as you can to perfection. And so however you must build it, you got to do it.
What are the social dynamics like? So
Tom is a musician. I love hanging out with him because I'm not very creative, and so just seeing how his mind works, it just fills my eye. It just widens my eyes because I'm like, how is he working at this level? Simon, he lives literally across the road from me. We both live in studios across from each other, so literally I can walk out of my house and it's less than a 30-second walk to get to his studio, and we chop it up all the time. He gives me a lot of career advice when it comes to just figuring out life after track, because that's a reality sport, isn't forever. And then Bruno is the guy I love a lot, but he's also going to be my competitor. And we've kind of subtly come to that realization. I'm always going to love each other for it, but we're going to be, if we want to go where we want to go, we're going to be big rivals. And so he's going to be someone who's going to force me to be excellent, because I'm going to show him excellent on the day we compete, and I know he's going to show me excellence. And so he's going to be a fierce rival of mine, but he's also been a great brother, a great friend, a great training partner, and a mentor. He's older than me. He's shown me the ropes, and it's now my job as a teammate for all the other guys who are coming up behind me to pass the mantle on to them and keep their torch lit. And so, yeah, those are the guys that push me day in and day out, and in all these multifaceted natures required to be a better rounded human being.
I would challenge you on one thing. You said you're not a creative person. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. You have to design your life. If you're a creative person, if you're designing your life, if you're always looking ahead, like into the future, you have to be a visionary. So, like yeah, and I'm always thinking about that, and it goes into the identity too. Yeah, you have to always. I mean, everyone decides to live their life subjectively. So I always like to say that everyone's an artist.
Yeah, no, I like that. Maybe the creativity that I defined that doesn't include me in the definition. I should redefine it like you did. I like that.
All right, let's talk about hobbies and interests a little bit. If you could take a free 21-day vacation anywhere in the world right now, expenses all paid off, where would you go?
I would probably want to go explore the East a bit more. I think I would either go Singapore, Malaysia, or the Philippines.
Oh, cool.
Those,
Asia.
just Asia. I mean, I've been fortunate to do Hong Kong. Tom's from Hong Kong. So,
Oh, really?
Yeah, visiting Hong Kong.
Oh, you went to Hong Kong?
Yeah,
what was that like?
I loved it. I mean, I was able to really experience both sides, from seeing some of like the night markets to then being able to hop on a cool yacht with some of his friends and family friends, and then I've never been to the East like that. I mean, the furthest I've gone, well, yeah, it was just basically the Middle East, so like the United Arab Emirates, and visiting the Gulf. So visiting somewhere like Hong Kong was awesome, and it was like, I need to come back here. Like Hong Kong needs to see my face, and the rest of Asia needs to see my face.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely want to explore those places, I'd say. Yeah.
What kind of music do you enjoy listening to? You have probably a diverse taste, or?
I'd say a mixed taste of just where I've grown up. One thing that I always come back to is I do like my UK kind of jazz, hip hop. I think, the artists like Lil Khan or Kofi Stone stick out to me. But then I like to keep my vibes with kind of neo soul, R&B. I listen to a lot of Georgia Smith,
okay.
Cleo Soul, Tom Misch. Those kind of artists I think always ring on my playlist. I should have brought my top 25 Spotify.
What are you listening to before the events?
Before the events, it is one song that really gets me going. Little Sims, Gorilla.
Okay.
Yeah, it just talks about how she's going beast mode, but in those moments of beast mode, she's representing where she's come from. And so I gotta rep my city. I gotta rep the UK when I'm competing.
I'm not familiar with that. What genre is that?
It is UK hip hop. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you like hip hop a lot, or?
I do mess with it. I mean, I like the rhythm behind it. In training, it's very useful because it kind of gets your head bumping, and that's the kind of rhythm you want to compete at.
When I'm in the gym, I'm always like listening to hip hop or some electronic music. Do you enjoy reading outside of the work? What do you like to educate yourself when you have the free time?
I mean, our socials are very big reading major, so anytime I do get I cheat. I'll be honest. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and so the most recent one I've just finished, or currently mostly the way through, is Story of a Native Son, James Baldwin. I like to kind of read. Although I'm very self-help focused, I don't read a lot of literature around that. I really enjoy reading the kind of literature written by scholars, and specifically black scholars, because it helps me, again, acknowledge the shoulders I'm standing on when I'm doing the things I do. A long time ago, you wouldn't see a collaboration like we're having right now, and I wouldn't have the space like this to speak. So being able to do that and read and listen to those individuals and hear the narrations that they're going through, it helps me acknowledge the shoulders I'm standing on, like I said. And doing it in an audiobook means I can just accomplish that way faster, because 3 hours and 45 minutes of an audiobook versus a month and a half of reading a book, because I'm not very fast when it comes to reading outside.
Yeah.
I do audiobooks.
You like history or more autobiographies?
It tends to be, because a lot of these they're more like civil rights literature, so I'd say it's a lot more historical just by chance, but there's a few autobiographies I've picked up along the way. Actually, I was recently in a black arts class focused on black arts movement during the 1950s, and it recently made me get into picking up art books and seeing black art from a different kind of standpoint. I think they're more so now going to become conversation pieces in a house that I'll hopefully one day buy, where I'll just leave it on the mantle and be like, yeah, I bought this book when I was this many years old. Haven't read it, but there's some cool pictures in there, so been collecting those bit by bit as well. But yeah,
history is so insightful.
True.
I love reading about history.
No, we have to acknowledge history because it shapes our future.
Shapes your future, shapes your perspective. Sure. Just seeing how humans have developed over the years.
And if we don't acknowledge it, it might repeat itself, and there's a lot to be done from history.
Exactly. I always love those inspirational stories too. I usually tend to, even in movies too, inspirational stories, the obstacles, and just all the different diverse ways people made their come-ups. Very, very insightful. So looking ahead, what does your athletic future look like?
Like I said, I want to stay in the States. In order to do that, I need a job. That's the reality of it, because the decathlon specifically doesn't pay that very, very much. In the decathlon, you only compete about 3 to 4 times a year. And in track, you have to compete to get your paychecks. And so therefore, if I'm only competing 4 times a year, those are the times I get paychecks, and it's not guaranteed I'm going to win all of those meets. And so you need a job to support you. I need a job to stay in the States. So I definitely want to give next year my best shot, because next year we have the Commonwealth Games and the European Championships. I'd love to see myself at those competitions. I do see myself at those competitions because it's part of my goal plans that I have and the career progressions I want to make in each event. And so I've planned it out. I just have to make the reality of figuring out how to stay here happen. But I definitely want to give it one more year, and then if British Athletics want to support me and support other decathletes as well, because they haven't done, I have to be honest, they haven't done a great job of supporting many decathletes along the way. If they want to get behind a couple of us, it'd be truly appreciated, because there's such a rich history of decathlon and multi-events in the UK, and very, very strong on the female side, but the last Olympic champion we had in the decathlon was before the 2000s, Daley Thompson, and it's going to take some investment if they want to get another one.
Yeah, adding on the work's gonna different schedule for you, a lot more things to think about.
That's true.
How do you stay motivated when you're adding more stuff to your plate? We've talked about linguistic programming.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else?
Just acknowledging where I'm going, but where I've also come from. I attribute a lot of emotion and feeling to certain objects I have in my house and my space, because it reminds me of the things I've achieved along the way, but also I have things hung up of where I want to go and where I want to see myself. And so when I do that, I'm able to constantly trigger myself and saying, okay, what you're doing is right, stick on this path, and you could be there. Just keep chipping away at these situations. And so it's just something I've done. I've always joked with all the people in my life, when I own stuff, I want it to have meaning. When people say, oh, where'd you get that light bulb from? Oh, I was here in this place. I want it to have a story. And so the stories I'm currently telling in my life are stories related to sport and the career I want to have and achieve. And so therefore, I'm attributing all of these emotions to these objects. And they constantly remind me, like the first thing you do if you come into my studio is you see all of my bibs from some of the championships I've been to then my mantelpiece has a couple of my trophies reminding me of what I want to achieve. But also on that mantelpiece shows stuff outside the track. And so all of these triggers constantly remind me about the things I'm trying to achieve when I come in, but also the last things I see before I leave my house. And so I think that's just, it just gives me a little boost for the day and gives me a little boost to stick to my routine when I come home.
You have a quote that stands out to you, and one that you would think would be impactful for someone who's working every single day, just trying to make it by the 9 to 5?
I heard this one recently by Chris Wilkes. I think I might probably saying his Instagram name, I forgot his full name, but the magic you're looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. So the magic you're looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. We already see ourselves as very busy creatures, and we want to be busy and we seek to be busy because it is a privilege to be busy. But sometimes just always repeating the mundane can also be to the detriment of us. And so therefore, we want to think of ways of how we can become more efficient and become better, become more task masterful in certain situations. And so I try to do that every day, of living fearlessly or trying to push myself beyond my limits of, if I want to achieve these magical things of going to a championship or winning a medal at a certain championship or standing on a certain podium, that magical feeling requires work that I've been avoiding. And I have to figure out what that work is. One of the things that used to block me a lot in my pole vault was I hated gripping up. Like if you're on a 15-foot pole, I'll grip up maybe like 14.7, 14.6. But now I'm like, okay, hey, if you want to jump these bigger bars, you need to grip high. You need to literally grip at the 15-foot mark. So then you can clear the bigger bars. And so that's the magic I'm looking for, is clearing that bar, and I need to do it by gripping up and being fearless in that moment. And so yeah, the magic I'm looking for is in the work that I'm avoiding. That's a quote. Time
management's hard. It's not something you just wing. You gotta put some thought into it. Management is hard for a lot of people. There's just so many distractions that people face constantly in life, having to switch from different ways of thinking. Like there's you when you go to the job, there's you when you're during physical exercise. You have to switch through all the different social situations with different people. You're constantly forced to change and think about things differently every time you have just any sort of life experience.
That's true.
So it's underrated how hard it is to stay focused in situations, especially when it just comes down to bettering your life and improving position A where you're at. One of my favorite quotes is from Bruce Lee, UW alum.
Yeah.
If you always put limits on what you can do, physical or anything else, it'll spread over into the rest of your life. It'll spread into your work, into your morality, into your entire being. There are no limits. There are plateaus, but you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. If it kills you, it kills you. A man must constantly exceed his level.
Yeah, that rhyme reminds me of the Rudyard Kipling poem. If I'm not sure if you've heard it, but it's a father talking to his son about how the world, be ready for the world, because the world is waiting for you and is expecting you and is expecting certain things. And one of the anecdotes from it that I'm probably not going to get perfectly correct, but is if you can walk among kings but keep the common touch, I think that's a really cool skill to have, because you're going to find yourself in situations where you're around people who are, way bigger in status than you. And so it's how can you stay authentic to yourself in those moments. And once you are in those positions and places where you are there consistently, how do you remember where you've come from? And yeah, for me, it's just attributing those meanings to all those, small things I have in my life, whether it be bibs, trophies, t-shirts, hats, anything.
Let's talk about the role of the man in society.
Mm-hmm.
I would say stoicism plays a huge part into that, of being able to manage your emotions. Suppressing your emotions is a big thing for a lot of guys out there. As I've gotten older, my friends and I, we've kind of stayed to ourselves because we're kind of forced to, almost, by just our activities and time we have. What do you think about stoicism? How do you use that emotional detachment?
The idea to be stoic is to endure hardship, but never to speak a word of it. And so I think, yes, it is a skill, but it can be a skill that can also obviously hinder our mental health, because there are men that might be struggling because of it, because we're constantly just bottling stuff up. I think the role is, for a man in society right now, is to be very adaptable and to know when to rise up to the occasion, but also when to learn and take a back seat a little bit, because times are changing, and times are changing very rapidly. And where we might have been sat, in the 20th century is very different to where we're sat now in the 21st century. I think the idea of being stoic in certain lifestyles or certain realms in our life is very skillful. Like in the gym, you're not going to complain that your arms out. You just keep pushing because you're going to make these gains that you want to make. But also, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to address various issues you have, because otherwise these are issues that might come up later and perpetuate and eat away at your soul. And the only thing you have at the end of the day, when everything is stripped back, is your soul, and you've got to protect that.
100%. It's about when life hits you and you're going through the ups and downs, how do you maintain level?
Mm-hmm.
How do you maintain level? Can stoicism truly help a person suppress negative emotions, or is it about redirecting them constructively?
I think that's the misjudgment with stoicism. It does tell us to suppress, but I think the greatest stoics out there are the people who can channel it. That it's a suppression that leads to an explosion. You compress it down like gunpowder, but you explode it out like a bullet. And so if you can channel that hardship in the right direction into what you want to achieve, it can be very helpful. And I think the stoics out there who are doing it very well are the stoics who are channeling it and achieving greatness from it and using that as their explosion forwards.
How do you balance stoic detachment with the need to be emotionally available for your loved ones or your friends?
Yeah, I think stoic detachment helps you acknowledge the gravity of certain situations, because maybe sometimes the pain you're feeling might not be as great as the pain somebody else is feeling, but also the roles can be reversed, and if we all have a few attributes of that, it can help. But I think I think about in the example of my girlfriend. She goes through her time of the months, and those are very difficult times for her because it's something I've never felt. And I might have my ups and downs of my training day, but what she's going through in her body internally is something she has to go through every month, and it doesn't get easier. And I think that's an opportunity where I can detach myself from whatever pain I've been having at training or in the day and really show up for that individual, show up for that loved one. And the same for my mum. She lives alone in the UK. Sometimes I have to put what I'm feeling aside of a pretty rubbish week and be able to show up for her, because I know my mother did a lot for me. And someone's always told me, if you want to know about struggle, you ask a black woman. And she's definitely had to put her stoic detachment aside to be able to show up for me and show her strength and be my rock. But now moving forward, I'm at that age where I have to pass it forward and pay it forward and sometimes also pay it back. And I think it can be helpful, but doing it as a detachment thing, we shouldn't see it as a situation of, again, suppression. It should be maybe putting it to the side, addressing the person who might need some love and nurturing then, being their rock, but still pick it up later and address it, because if we ignore it, it's still going to eat away at us. And then, like I said, it's channeling it, putting it aside, and you can channel it later then.
A little bit about obligation for self-care for the man and protecting your work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prioritize self-care while balancing the responsibilities of caring for others?
I think it's something that's got to sway backwards and forwards. There's going to be times where you're going to have to take care of people. As a man, there's going to be quite a few times, because as your family grows, there's going to be certain responsibilities you have. But also, in those moments, it's okay to lean on strong people, because there are strong people around you. You just have to acknowledge them and let them be strong for you. Don't always think you're the strongest person in the room. It's okay to have somebody else be strong for you. And so I really appreciate all the men and women in the village that have been strong for me in order to do that, because it allows me to be vulnerable and therefore be able to heal in those processes and have other people be strong for me, because then once I've rebuilt myself and I've grown and I've matured in those times of vulnerability, I'm also able to be strong for that person, because like I said, stuff will ebb and flow. It'll go back and forward. Sometimes it'll be 50-50, sometimes it'll be 70-30. You just have to be ready for when you have to take that weight.
And it changes depending where you are in life. A lot of the time people have to work on themselves and come back when they're mentally, physically, financially prepared for being able to help the ones they care about. How do you reconcile the idea of self-preservation with the need to serve or protect others, especially in tough situations?
I've always judged it as it's very context dependent. I think that question really applies to me is when I'm in season, because I've got to preserve my peace in order to be the best athlete I can be when I'm on the track, and therefore it means trying to dead off arguments that I might have with people, or dead off beef-like conversations that I might be having with people, but then you still have to address them later. And so therefore, if you address it months later, or days later, or weeks later, it's still okay, but like I said, for me it's a context-dependent situation. When it depends where I am in my year, where I'm at in my season, and where I'm at in my life. I think it's a difficult question to ask, because you can't just ignore these situations. They are very real, and they're real for certain people as well, because there's a reason why they brought it up, or you brought it up. But it's always a context-dependent thing of when to preserve yourself and preserve your peace, but also when to address it and be strong for someone and show them the real you in that process.
I've definitely noticed as I've gotten older, like, protecting your peace is so important.
True.
Needing that space from other people is just, it's a privilege. Like, I've experienced living in quads, close quarters, a lot of my life. Yeah, my grandma and I would go from house to house, living in close quarters, and this was the first year I ever had my own room, and I just couldn't even believe it. It was just like, wow, I can step out. It's like in my own little world for a little bit, and develop in ways I hadn't before, and learned a lot of valuable lessons that way. When it comes to mental health, how do you differentiate between resilience and the need for professional help? Because I see so many people, especially guys, they don't want to ask for help. I've experienced that too. I don't ask for help when I'm struggling. So how do you feel comfortable with asking for help?
I think it's resilience is obviously a skill to have, but what's always helped me is being surrounded by a strong village, because when you're vulnerable to that strong village, they will always recommend you to the best situations because they want the best for you. And every time I've gone to some sort of mental help or mental health help or mental fitness help, it's always been recommended to me. And so really listen to the village around you is the best advice I could give for that. And no village is trying to tear you down, because in any village you have a certain job to do and you have to do it very well in order to benefit everyone in that community. And therefore they want to make sure every person in that community is physically and mentally healthy. And so therefore they look after their own, they nurture their own, and if they need to pass you on to someone in order to do that, they'll let you know.
I'm sure as an only child you probably had a lot of situations where you felt lonely in your life and stuff, and a lot of guys out there who are isolated, working on themselves and just trying to make it by. I think that one of the great things about social media is that people can tailor what they're seeing. So if you don't have that support, you can find somebody online who's motivating you, who's inspiring, who's leading by example and through their actions and achievements. I think that's one of the real positives about social media. And I think that modern day advantage now to actually choose who you want. It's literally, you get to pick your village these days. It might not be in person, but it still leaves a very, very big impact. So we're wrapping up here. How do you plan to leave an impact?
I think just through everywhere I go, I'd love to be able to leave a legacy. That's the goal I work towards, whether it be in the record books, the all-time lists, or just the community impact I've had. I've been fortunate to occupy some very privileged spaces, through Milford graduating as head boy, to then being the president of the BSA here and sitting on the Big Ten Student Athlete Leadership Board. In all those spaces, I just want to make sure that I'm representing myself, but more importantly, representing my community in those situations, that I'm a voice for the voiceless, and I'm also advocating for those people and making sure that I'm mentioning the change that needs to be made, but then holding those people accountable to making that change. And I think that's the legacy I'd like to leave. And it just takes me back to that quote of, the magic I'm looking for is the work that I'm avoiding. There's always more work to do. There's always more stuff we can change. We can always be better. And so if I want to achieve this magical lifestyle and magical lifestyle for others, it requires hard work, persistence, and consistency, most importantly.
One final thing. What's one piece of advice you give to people, no matter their age, something that you believe would help people live fuller, more intentional lives?
What I'd tell myself is probably find your people, find your mentors, and really listen to them. Because when you find your mentor, it's usually somebody who's gone and done something that you want to achieve, and then ask them how they did it, and then ask them again and see if their answer stays the same, then ask them a third time. Because I think every time the story is a little bit different, and you might find a little bit more information in those stories and situations. And therefore, I'd really encourage anyone to find their people, find their village, and really just find those figures there and really pull them along with you and just become a sponge to learn as much as you can. And for me, that's the person I always go back to is my mother. She's such a strong individual. She's taught me tremendous things. I wouldn't be the man I am without her. But there are also other people I must acknowledge have helped me become the man I am. But yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jami, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your considerate approach and thoughtful answers. Best of luck to you in your future and your career. Hopefully we can come back and do this again in the future, see how much we've grown. And to the audience, remember, the best time to take action is now. Thank you very much.
Chicken, man.